Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time out of your days to join me. It's just going to be me running this session. Patrick Foley-Donoghue. Hopefully, you're all here to learn about the opportunities as a part of your University of Tasmania degree and what it avails you to study overseas. So let's press on. Today we'll cover a few things. We'll do an introduction because it always helps to know who you're working with, who's out there to support you as a University of Tasmania student. So who we are and where you can find us. Then we'll talk a little bit about why study overseas. What are the benefits? As I mentioned before, we'll be joined by Sibylla Anderson, who's the one of the careers coordinators at UTAS. We'll talk about not just the purpose of a UTAS degree, why are we all here and what are we all studying, but we'll go a little bit into, in particular, some finer points to do with your career, long-term life goals. Next, we'll briefly touch on your opportunities, your options, so where you can go as a part of your UTAS degree, which will be exciting. Finances, as a student, once upon a time at UTAS studying business, I well and truly understand how money can make the world go round. So finances, how much will all of this cost? We'll go into the application process, so how and when students should apply. And then we'll round out with a few questions. So the intro. First and foremost, all conversations lead to COVID-19. Certainly at this point in time, there's a lot of uncertainty. That seems to be that's the word that rings true in everyone's ears. So it's important to note that the Australian borders are currently closed. So there's no outbound physical face-to-face exchanges or study abroads going on. There's not a lot of travel. So there's a travel ban for all international journeys. So we'll get into what is available for students. So essentially what programs are still available. We're sort of pivoting to virtual programs at this point in time. Obviously, we're cautiously proceeding with what sort of programs are available in semester one. So that's running now. The winter programs, so between the two semesters, semester two for exchange, there'll be an announcement made around whether or not that's going ahead. It's looking extremely unlikely at this point in time, face-to-face exchange. It's highly unlikely the borders will be open. There'll be an announcement on the 15th of March, so not long now. So yes, a lot of uncertainty, but I suppose hang tight and we'll talk to you today about some longer term planning, if and when the borders are reopening, what are the sort of programs that are available to you. So that's COVID. It's always nice to meet the people that you're working with. So our team leader at the Student Mobility Office is Marnie. She's a wonderful bucket of fun. Then we've got Daisy. She's usually my off-sider that helps conduct these meetings, but today she could not join. But she's the coordinator for students in CALE, the College of Arts, Law and Education, and COME, the College of Health and Medicine, helping those students go on outbound programs as a part of their degree. And then last but not least, there's me. There's a photo just to prove I work here. I help students in COBE and COSE, so the College of Business and Economics and Science and Engineering. So if you're COBE students, COSE students, I'm your guy, basically to help you get an internationalized experience as a part of your degree. I'm originally from Tasmania. I work in Tasmania, love the place. I went on an exchange as a part of my degree at UTAS. I went and studied in Canada, so I'm an ambassador for these programs. I strongly believe in the transformational impact that studying overseas can have on you. You can become a leader. You become more confident, competent. I have so many stories about my overseas experience that I'd love to be able to share with students. So I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and yeah, I want to be a champion for it. I want other students to go overseas like I did. And last, I suppose, but not least, Sibylla Anderson. Sibylla, as I said, from the careers team at UTAS. Sibylla, can you give us a little bit of a a background. What's your background? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I am the Leadership and Careers Education Advisor for Southern Tassie at UTAS. Oh gosh, I have worked in a million different things before. I've lived in 5 other countries. So I also very much believe in the transformative power of living overseas. Unfortunately, I never did that as part of my study, but I have lived in Costa Rica, Argentina, the Netherlands, the UK, and the US for brief periods of time.
Very well travelled, Sibylla. I'm sure there's some stories there. It looks like you're beaming in from what the Niagara Falls in Canada.
This is just Mount Field, so a bit closer to home than Niagara Falls.
That's a snazzy background. Unfortunately, you've just got a big television in the background of
I'll make you something, Patrick. I'll make you something.
That'd be really kind. Thank you. So that's we're here. We're resources for students. We're here to respond to questions. Sibylla and I will have a little tete-a-tete, a little back and forth, hopefully a conversation about careers and opportunities within this session. But buckle up. I suppose it is going to be 30 or 40 minutes of us talking to you. So stick around. There'll be questions at the end. Yeah, I'll be answering as best I can anything that you pop into the chat. So plowing on. So that's the team. We're here to help. Student mobility, the Student Mobility Office. So this is our one-stop shop for all students seeking to study overseas. Got globes there. We're located in Sandy Bay campus at UTAS in Hobart. So what we do as a team is basically to help students choose which programs are suitable for them as a part of their degree. We're administrators. We're joining the dots for students. We're a resource to help you out. We assist students with the application process. If you're going on an exchange program, we nominate you to a partner university. We say, Jack's a good student, he's got a good GPA. So we act as a liaison between the University of Tasmania and other partner universities. So we join the dots. I provide a pre-departure session, so something like this, where I tell all my ghost stories about all the things that went wrong when I went on exchange, but all the things that went right and all the good things about it. So that's just right the way through. I'm here, and so are my colleagues, basically to assist students where they're not sure. It's an unfamiliar process. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so it makes sense for us to be able to say, look, this is what I do on a daily basis. If you have questions, I'm here to answer them. And we do more than that. I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So I'm here, again, as I say, to assist, and that's what the office is for. So why study overseas? And what are the benefits? Now this I could go on forever about, but I've just chosen a few highlights, I suppose. And I'd also like to note that all of these photos are from students that have been on outbound programs. So this is Tim, fantastic guy, great student, and he studied the Bachelor of Business and Economics at UTAS. But as a part of his degree, he went and studied at Colorado State University. This is a pretty cool photo. So I'm not sure. Good for the grams. I mean, that's another great reason to go overseas. But it's all about seeking out new challenges, and you might be and combining your study at UTAS, but you're able to sort of navigate and negotiate these freedoms that you have as a student, and you're actually able to go overseas as a part of your degree when the borders are open and allowing. So it's a combination of those things. Some of the benefits, again, you create an international network, not just of friends. I mean, for me, when I went and studied in Canada, my housemates were Spanish and French. So I went over to meet Canadian people, but here's this massive cohort of students from all over the globe, all condensed and in one place for only a semester. And it's just really impactful. You're all in the same boat. And it's so surprising just how quickly you gel. So that's from the friendship side of things. I now have friends all over the globe, which is very, that's a brag, but that's really cool, I think. But it's also an opportunity to go and study and in a new place and get in touch with new academics and even what are they doing in different cafes and restaurants, or if if you're an entrepreneur, you're seeing how different cultures operate. And so I think that's a huge part of what an exchange is. You grow your confidence, you become a project manager. I mean, I'm here to help, but essentially you're making this as a student happen for yourself. You're a go-getter, you're putting yourself out there. You become more self-sufficient. So you're living away from home for a time if you're going in on an outbound program. Building your confidence, self-sufficiency. You're also great at project managing because this is something to look forward to. If you're a first year student thinking about going on an exchange in your second or third year, this is something that you're doing your studies semester in, semester out, but then it's something in the pipeline to look forward to, and it's a project that takes time. So that's a huge part of it, I think. I mentioned before, experiencing a new culture, new languages, different dress codes, different beliefs. These are all sorts of things that you'll have to navigate within an Australian workplace. Certainly, we're such a multicultural society within Australia, which I think is fantastic. But for me personally, in my workplace, I work with people from all around the world, and you need to be able to work together. You need to develop this sense of understanding, but also teamwork. And if you aren't able to reconcile other people's views, if you have a really hard line, it can be really difficult just to get by in a day-to-day fashion. So I think experiencing a new culture, the sort of soft skills and interpersonal skills that you develop by undertaking an exchange or a study abroad program, these are vital elements just to be a functional human being in your everyday society. A cool thing about going on an exchange or any overseas program is that they're unique. You're actually breaking away from your traditional pathway of studying at UTAS, and you're taking the bull by the horns. You're doing something that other people haven't done, and that sort of differentiation that I decided what I was doing from an early start in my career, in my studies, taking unique classes and going on, taking the less traveled road is something that's, I think, and what we'll get into later, is something that employers look at rather favorably. And so I guess rounding out this list and this narrative is it improves your future career prospects, which I think is probably a good point to snowball into discussion with Sibylla. So again, thank you for joining us. But I've sort of prepared some questions, Sibylla, which I'm going to put up on the screen just as something for us to come back to sort of ground us, this conversation. Employability. So we're studying an undergraduate or a master's or an honours or a PhD, but what's at its core, we're looking for a career, we're looking for friendship, camaraderie, we're looking for our place in society. So when we're talking about employability, that's my understanding as a layman, as not a career counsellor. So I'm still trying to work out what my career is. I think that's an ongoing process. But specifically, there are so many elements when it comes to employability. So maybe you could break it down for us in a way that it isn't a jumble spilling out of my mouth. So what do you think, from an expert's perspective, what makes someone employable?
Wouldn't call myself an expert and can't guarantee words won't jumble out of my mouth either. But I think the difference between a lot of people, when they think about this kind of stuff, they think of employment, like can they get a job, a specific job that they have in mind. But employability and being employable is like a way bigger concept. It's more about, it's like you say that you might not have necessarily figured out your career. I definitely haven't figured out my career. I've tried a million different things. But being employable means that whatever you do want to do, you can find employment, and not just that you're employable right now, but you're employable into the future. So it includes stuff like, the skills you have, the employability skills. There's like a whole set of skills that's like that. The experiences that you've had, your self-awareness. So do you know who you are? Do you know like your strengths and what you're good at, but also maybe what your weaknesses might be? That's all part of your employability. It can include things like your networks. You mentioned, you know, having contacts all over the world. We know that makes someone more employable. Like the more people you know in the more places, the more you can call on other people for advice and help, or, you know, opportunities. Yeah, so it's a whole lot of different things. It goes into what makes you employable. So there are people who are employed who aren't necessarily that employable. Like they've got that job, but that doesn't mean if that job fell through, they'd find it really easy to go out and get another job. And so, yeah, employable is about being more than just able to be employed in your one industry. It's about sort of being able to find your way in a whole lot of different things, because you know who you are and what you've done, and you can apply that to different settings. I think that's why it's really why exchange is such a helpful thing.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I think that really strikes a chord, I think, with me specifically, when, I mean, you can lose a job, right? But you can't lose your skills. And so
Absolutely.
those transferable skills are really vital. And so it's really, I guess, it makes sense then when you do go overseas. I mean, I mentioned all of those benefits before, how it can be building up your confidence by achieving this. Wow, I got overseas. I broke away, like I moved away from my family, and I undertook this project, and it happened. It's this sort of competence that people develop, and
the self-awareness, I think, like it's when you put yourself in these kind of challenging situations and you really test yourself, that you find out who you are and what situations you thrive in and what situations like stress you out, and those kind of things like really help you make decisions going forward, and like identifying, you know, careers that would be good for you, and also like sell yourself into those careers, so convince other people that you would be good in that. So yeah, you're right, like it's that figuring out who you are and having the confidence to articulate it that I think is really
with the next up point. So I thought, so this is just a guiding question, I suppose. So what skills, if there's any that I missed, I suppose, could a student pick up through studying overseas that would be helpful for work? I'm sure there's there's extraordinarily long lists out there, I suppose. But is there anything that I've that you think is a glaring obvious skill? And when we talk about skills, what are the skills that employers are looking for, but specifically come out when you travel? I mean, when you've traveled overseas, for instance, and lived overseas, what are the things that that, let's say, in a job interview, that have really helped you out? Is it the examples that you have? I mean, it's not just experience, I suppose, but there's also, I think there are specific skills that shine through because you're willing to travel, because you're willing to experience new things. So what do you think are the main ones?
When we talk about employability skills, they're sometimes called soft skills or transferable skills, because they are these like long-term skills that mean that you can do anything. And we find that they are actually the skills that you get asked about in a job application or in an interview. People don't want to know, like, if you're an engineer, you know, can you do this very specific engineering process? They want to know like about your soft skills and things like that. So all of those things are things that you can get out of exchange. So the first biggest one that you see everybody talk about is communication. Communication is like a massively broad thing. It's all about how you understand other people and how they understand you, and being able to communicate with people from different cultures, in different kinds of language at different levels. That is a massive thing that you are going to be asked about no matter what field you're studying. Every single job advertisement that I have seen in the last 3 years, and I spend a lot of time looking at them, has asked about communication. Other employability skills that, I mean, they're quite obvious how they link to something like exchange. So problem solving, nothing is going to go perfectly while you're doing this, but problem solving is a really big one. Teamwork, you're going to end up working with other people in this, but they're going to be like really interesting, diverse people. So you're going to have some great experience and examples of those skills there. You know, technology, can you learn new things? All of these, you're building great examples of them. Can you plan and organize yourself? Self-management, so can you kind of look after yourself without being supervised all the time? That's definitely something that you're going to need to do on exchange. So I would say out of the sort of employability skills that we talk about, exchange is such a really easy way to fit with each of those skills, and they are the main things that you're going to be asked about in a job application process, no matter what field you're going into.
I think that's great. I mean, that really is ticking a lot of the boxes. I know that, and this is something that we go over in pre-departure. We sort of pre-unpick or certainly unpack some problems. I suppose that students will hopefully overcome when they're overseas. I didn't have data, I didn't have a map, I had to ask for help when I needed it. These sorts of things, problem-solving skills is certainly something that shines through for me. And that willingness to sort of roll with the punches when things aren't going your way. I think that they certainly shine through. So I think this is the third and last from me. So another guiding question was, how could you talk about your overseas study to help you get a job? And I think that this probably comes back to the experiences, and that's when you can say, well, this happened when I was overseas. A lot of those job interviews, if you can get to that interview stage, it is about having those real life examples. Employers, again, in my limited experience, would be like, well, can I work with this guy? What's this Patrick person actually like face to face? He's good on paper, he's got all these skills, but is that I guess we've sort of covered some of these, but for students, when they are looking for a job, what are the things that really, what are the appropriate things to talk about, and what are some of the inappropriate things to talk about when you talk about studying overseas? What are employers, I guess, what do they want to hear?
Yeah, sure. So I think the main thing to realize is in a written job application or in an interview, sorry for those of you who might have had whole careers before and don't need to hear about this, but you never just get to say, like, I have great communication skills. You have to give them evidence of those great communication skills and tell them how you know you have great communication skills. So you always are going to need to provide examples from your experience to back up the fact that you have these skills. And the reason that something like exchange is really good for that is because the workforce is incredibly competitive and getting more so by the minute. So sometimes you will see like 400 people applying for the same job. And if 400 people have been asked about their problem solving skills, what you start to see, and they're all people who studied the same course and things like that, because it's a job that requires a degree in that field. So, you know, it's 400 people who've all come out of the same degree. They've all got that same experience. But you start to see people giving the same examples all the time. So for problem solving, something that we see a lot in people applying for jobs is that they'll talk about, like, I was doing a group work assignment and one person didn't pull their weight, and so, you know, I solved that problem like this. If you're reading 399 job applications where people use an example like that from studying, and then one person is like, I went to Italy on exchange and I got horribly lost and I didn't speak the language and I had to solve that problem in these ways, it's so much more interesting to have like those unique experiences. And it makes you stand out from a crowd of people who are all just saying the same things that, you know, they are good examples. I mean, if someone's not pulling their weight in their group work assignment, it's not that that's a wrong example to use if that's all you have, but they really can't express how boring it is to read that many people using the same kind of thing, and how how nice it is to read somebody who's done something a bit more interesting. It also actually means that you can get away with a little bit less. So if you're going to be writing the same example as everyone else, you have to write it perfectly to stand out. Whereas if your example is actually just really interesting in and of itself, you can get away with not quite being as good at communicating it and things like that. So I actually don't think there's a huge amount that is inappropriate. I mean, I guess there's always things that you don't think about that are inappropriate. I mean, I once had somebody who talked in a job interview about the evidence of their time management skills was that they answered emails while they were on the toilet. So like there are things that are inappropriate that it never occurs to me that I need to tell people not to do. So I guess obviously like the time that you got really drunk with a bunch of people in another country and went out is obviously not a good example. But apart from that, I do think that, I mean, look, not every employer is going to love to hear 20 stories from your overseas experience, but if you use it kind of strategically to kind of in like that way to stand out and give you a little bit more more depth and things like that, I think it's really a great way to just look like you've done some interesting things with your life. And I think the other thing, like you were saying about exchange, is even if you're not asked about everything, it implies things about you, like that you have courage and that you take on challenges and that you're not lazy. Like no lazy person ever went on exchange, like all of these kinds of things. So you know, it's one of those things that says more about you than what you're directly saying, if that makes sense.
I think that's a good point. No lazy person ever went on exchange. Absolutely. I'm going to use that in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that I like the example you gave of getting lost in Italy, I suppose, that depth of character, those problem-solving skills. But it's also when you are speaking, let's say, in an interview, when you mention that, oh, I was on an exchange in Italy, and that's people are heard in that moment. They're recognized, I suppose, positively for their bravery, but also difference. And it's when you form those sorts of those connections. It's like, oh, I've been to Italy. Oh, cool. Like, what did you do there? These are the sorts of things that people can use as touch points or lodestones of culture when you can say, I've done this thing. And other people will say, well, that's really exciting. I haven't done that. You've done something I haven't done, which is exciting in and of its own self. Or it's, I've done that as well. What was it like for you? And then it can build on that. That's where you get recognition from peers. And I think those are the sorts of things, those are real life human examples, as opposed to just things can be very cold when you're talking about a group project with people that you've never met and then never worked with again. So it's
That's
great.
so true. I think it's that extra little bit of like people hire whole people. They don't just hire a set of skills. And so, you know, when they have something that's interesting about you that they can talk to you about, they're thinking of you more as a whole person, not just as like a qualification and a set of skills that you're claiming. And so, yeah, I really agree with that.
Well, I think that's terrific. Thank you so much, Sibylla, for sort of hashing out and talking us through some of those points, because I think that this is beneficial for students thinking about their career, what they're studying and why. These are the sorts of longer term projects, goals, plans. These are the sorts of ways that you can increase your employability, but you're also your career prospects simply by taking a less traveled road. So that's great. I'm not sure what your availability is like for the rest of this session, but if you could stick around to the end, I'm sure there'll be some questions.
I'll hang around in case there's any questions.
Cool, nice one. Well, thank you so much. I know that you sent me through some resources. It would have been when we arranged this, when we set this up a couple of months ago, but that's the website for students interested in maybe booking a meeting with Sibylla. You can go to Career Hub. And then also there's heaps of resources to, in dot point form that can help you with interviews and think about your career prospects. So check out that website and please stick around to ask any questions to Sibylla. So that was a long one, but it was fun for me anyway. So why study overseas? Now let's talk about the types of programs, okay? So we know what the benefits will be, but what are the things that you can actually do? So let me just break down some of the lingo. So when we talk about student mobility, that encompasses all of these different things. The first one is student exchange, which we've talked about. So this is, again, your opportunity to combine overseas studies with travel. You totally immerse yourself in another culture for 1 or 2 semesters as a part of your degree, usually in 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year, depending on your degree. We have 140 plus different partners all over the globe. So let's say the borders reopen in 2022. You want to start thinking about where you can go and where you'd like to study now, because that whole process, I suppose, we started a year early. So you might be applying in semester 1 next year to go and study overseas in semester 2 next year. So that's student exchange. The fees side of things, you continue paying fees as regular to UTAS. Exchange, I like to see it as you're just swapping students. So we get one university student from the University of California. So we get a Californian here, and then we send one student over there. There's no fees involved because they continue paying fees back home and you continue paying fees at UTAS. With these exchanges, there are scholarships and financial assistance, different pots of money that are available to students, which is great, very helpful. I'll talk about that a bit later. And students going overseas are covered by UTAS insurance. So that's a bonus. Fleur, really upbeat student, went and studied at Linnaeus in Sweden. She studied a Bachelor of Business. So again, these are some of the students, the real people that have actually been on outbound programs that I can get you in touch with, and you can ask questions to them because they're your peers. They're students like you that have studied overseas. So there's exchange. There's also study abroad. Now, study abroad, just see that as essentially fee paying. You're studying at UTAS, you've chosen to study at UTAS, but guess what? If you wanted to, you can study anywhere in the world. So for students that want to try studying at a different university that we're not partners with, so a non-partner, you can go and study anywhere. I encourage you to do that. If they have programs that excite you, that you think will have a career or a job outcome at the end, go for it. But it's where the buck lands. If you go on a study abroad program, you're going to have to pay tuition fees or to the program provider. So these things cost money. UTAS, in these sort of study abroad examples, we don't have an established relationship with universities, and that's why you need to pay funds to them. If you want to go on a study abroad program, I've got a limited knowledge base I don't know about every university in the world. I'm sorry, my head is only so big. So I can only give you so much advice and assistance. But we did have a student in our honours who went and studied at European University at St. Petersburg in Russia. So that was incredible. She's just such an inspiring student to break away from. It's a very, it's highly uncommon, I suppose, these sorts of study abroad programs, but Dana made it work. And so it's something that I'm happy to say students can do. Another word that you'll come into contact with is short-term programs. So guess what? A lot of students can't commit to studying overseas for a semester or a year, and that's perfectly reasonable. You can have all sorts of different commitments. So whether it's family or you've got a partner here that you don't want to leave, or you need to work on a farm over summer, all sorts of things. So who knows? We hear all kinds. But so this is a sort of, I suppose, a compromise, or it's where you go and you study during the summer or winter breaks. So short-term programs have 3 main options or opportunities. So there's third-party providers. They provide sort of intensive language programs, internships, or placements. Third-party providers, examples would be CIS Australia or Teachers. In weeks gone by, so in our info session, number 2, we had CIS, the coordinator from them, come and speak about that. But there's a recording online, which I'm happy to share with you. One of the other options is summer and winter programs. So these can be exchanges or study abroad programs. So our partner universities offer winter programs and summer programs that you can go and study at a relatively low cost, which is cool. And then there's university-led programs, so this is the University of Tasmania. Certain faculties and colleges, so the College of Business and Economics, the College of Science and Engineering, the College of Health Medicine, and CAEL, College of Arts, Law and Education, all run their own individual little programs that can count back for as elective credit. So let's talk about these programs in depth. The NCP. So the NCP aims to increase, and your ears should really prick up, okay? This is the big point on the NCP that I need to make perfectly clear is this is an Australian government initiative to assist students going on outbound programs. It's the Australian government throwing money at Australian students to go and study overseas as a part of their degree. They want to establish a sort of rite of passage for Australian undergraduate students to study overseas. And they're giving away grants and scholarship funding to make that happen. I mean, it aligns Australia's economic, diplomatic and political relationships and it's really making us aware of our geographical location. So we're in Oceania, we're in the antipodes, all these different words to describe where Australia is located in the Southern Hemisphere. And so what countries are we close to? What countries are we close to economically, in trade, diplomatically? What are our relationships like with Korea and China and Japan? And all these different countries that are close by. One of the other aims is to increase the number of work-ready graduates. So this just ties back to the discussion that we had, I suppose, with Sibylla around if you've got an international experience in Japan, then as a part of your degree, then you're more likely to work there, to live there, to visit there in the future. So specifically, these are the aims of the new Colombo Plan, but what actually are they when we talk about them? So for me, it involves two distinct program types. One is a scholarship. Now that's designed for high achievers. It's a prestigious program for study abroad and exchange students. You can go overseas for from 1 semester to a year. It includes an internship, a mentorship, and a language immersion. So this is just it's valued at $67,000, which is a huge amount of funding just to get you overseas and start experiencing one of these countries in the Indo-Pacific. All of these, to be eligible for this, you need to meet the eligibility criteria, you need to be a domestic student, you need to be studying an undergraduate degree, and all the programs that you study overseas have to count back towards your degree. But it's a huge amount of funding for high achieving students. So it's that carrot on the stick. Why are you doing well? What's the point of doing well at the university unless you're rewarded? So be rewarded and put yourself out there. And when the scholarship is announced, probably in 2 months from now, roughly, get in touch. And likewise, we'll be promoting that scholarship. So that's one arm of the NCP, the new Colombo Plan. The other one is mobility programs. And these programs are running now. So these are short-term and semester-based. They have an internship or mentorship component. Sometimes they're practicums or placements, but they're essentially, generally speaking, a short-term immersive experience in country. Now with coronavirus wrecking a lot of what I do in my job, we've pivoted to an online space. So there are going to be some virtual programs that will be running in the winter and summer breaks this year. And those programs are available to be applied for now. Again, these programs run within the Indo-Pacific, so there are 40 different locations, 40 different countries all around and within the Indo-Pacific that get funding. They're undergraduate programs, they're credit bearing, so they count back towards an elective or two electives or more, and that's a part of your degree. And one of the main parameters is students must be 18 to 28 years old. So if you go onto our website, there's a list. There's the Hacker Exchange. So that's for that's sort of an innovators for students that are studying business. That's an innovator's delight. That's a program that's entirely online. It's intensive, so it runs over 2 weeks, and it's completely paid for with new Colombo Plan funding. So it's just another way to tick off an elective as a part of your degree, and also meet some bright sparks who are passionate about what they're doing. So that's the new Colombo Plan in short. Let's talk about finances. So I've rejigged this slide a little bit from the weeks that have gone by. I just want to break down exchange, study abroad, and short-term programs. So we've got exchange. So I said before, you continue paying regularly tuition fees to UTAS. Study abroad, I'll break down into two parts. Third-party providers, so teachers, CAS, you incur fees to cover the cost of the program, okay? So that could be anywhere from $500 right up to, let's say you did an immersive online internship with CAS, that could be something like $2,000. If you go to a non-partner university, you pay those tuition fees. There's all sorts of different universities all around the world. Some universities are cheaper than others. But if you go on a study abroad program, which you can do, just be aware that you'll be paying those fees. Now, new Colombo Plan mobility grants, which I talked about just a moment ago on the last slide, those programs are fully funded. Okay, so UTAS applies, say, we're going to run a program in Indonesia, for example, and Japan. We want to get mobility grants, so pots of money for about 12 to 50 students, say, and each student will be awarded a mobility grant if they're successful applying for the program. So they can be ranged from 500 up to 7 grand. So again, free money for students that are willing to apply for these programs. It's very enticing. Just going back to study abroad and exchange for a moment, these semester-based programs, we recommend that students have access to 10 grand, and that's to cover the costs of accommodation when you're overseas, let's say in 2022 or 2023, accommodation, flights, visas. Okay, so those are the big ticket items. So if you're going to go and study and live overseas as a part of your degree in the future, it's very important that you have access to that amount of money. But how could you possibly have 10 grand when you're working full time? So there are 3 major pots of money available to students. One is the OS Help Loan. That just stands for the Overseas Student Help Loan. There's scholarships, and then there's Centrelink. So with the OS Help Loan, if let's say you go and study in North America, let's say America, the USA or Canada, or even Europe, it's a non-Asian country, you're eligible for a $6,900 loan from the government, which is awesome, and that just lumps in with your HECS. Again, Australian initiative to get students living, working, studying, and developing relationships within Asia and the Asia Pacific means that they're willing to basically grant you more money. So it's an $8,300 loan that you can get out to go and study within Asia. If you do a language study, the funding can be even more, which is very terrific. That's great. Again, as I said, it gets added to your HECS debt, so get the money now, worry about it later. There are eligibility criteria. So this Always Help Loan is for domestic, so Australian students only. You can take out 2 loans. So when I went and studied overseas on an exchange program, I was only overseas for 1 semester, so I took the loan out once. But if you wanted to stay overseas for 2 years, you could get the loan out twice. Now, scholarships. I've got a couple of these bolded. So there are UTAS scholarships. So when I went on exchange, I was lucky enough to receive the Estelle Marguerite, which was $3,000 scholarship. But there's also the Travel Overseas scholarship, which is anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000. So these are different pots of money available to students going on an exchange. Again, money's important. These are the sorts of things that you want to think about after you've applied. There's country-specific scholarships. These are mostly for exchanges, but let's say you went to Japan or the USA, there are scholarships specific to location. And then there's host university. So the host, that's the place that you're going on an exchange. There's a handful of different universities that offer specific scholarships to UTAS students. So University of Northern Arizona, that's a good one, that's for accommodation. Exeter, I believe, might be £1,000, which is a good amount of funding to help you, again, with your accommodation. Western Washington University in the USA, they offer a really lucrative stipend to all UTAS students. And that's valued at somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 just to pay for your accommodation for your entire semester. So that's huge. And NUFS, Nagoya University of Foreign Studies, they've got another massive, I think it's the JASO scholarship, which is a huge amount of funding for students looking to study in Japan, specifically at Nagoya. So that's very enticing, very lucrative. A lot of students go over, study Japanese and intensively, immerse in an immersion, and come back richer than when they departed. So there's a word to the wise. We've also got discipline specific. So up until recently, COSI students, so students that I look after, and Catalyst program students, they're guaranteed a scholarship. So if you're studying science and engineering, lucky you, that's built into their program of funding. So that's huge. It just means that basically less barriers when you're guaranteed to get a scholarship. That's good news. Centrelink, last but not least, this is something I'm, well, not proud of, but happy to share. While I was overseas studying on an exchange program, my Centrelink payments continued, which is incredible. Never in your life will you be receiving Centrelink funding, so government funding, and be living overseas. Because you're still technically studying at UTAS on an exchange program, Centrelink payments can continue. So that's huge. And because you're living away from home, you're an independent, which means you might get additional funding. So these are different pots of money just to start thinking about. The OS helpline for domestic students, scholarships, some guaranteed, some you need to apply for, and Centrelink, again, domestic students, the money can continue coming in. So that's, again, the money's a big one. And now the application process. So what are you doing when you're applying, okay? First, you need to think about eligibility. If you're going on a study abroad or exchange program, you need to have completed your first year. And that's the first year of full-time studies. You want 100 credit points. I want to try and break down the lingo here, but in essence, every single class that you study at UTAS will generally be 12.5% credit bearing, 12.5, 25, 37.5, 50, so 50 credits in a semester. That's 4 classes, 4 units. Do that twice, that's a year, it's 100 credit points. So before you go overseas, you need to have completed 100 credit points. Virtual programs, okay? Most students will study just 1 unit online at a partner university or do something in the summer and winter. So we only want you to have completed 50 credit points or more because the barriers, basically want to remove barriers. So as long as you've completed a semester at UTAS successfully, then you'll be able to go on a virtual program. We want you to maintain a GPA of at least 4.0. It's a pass credit average, so 50, 60% for all of your classes. So we just don't want you going overseas if you're not succeeding already at UTAS. We want you to be succeeding at UTAS and then take the next step and potentially get yourself out there. And then there is college-specific criteria, okay? So with exchange programs and with virtual programs, you can only study things that count back towards your degree. We don't want you to waste your time, okay? So there's a course approval process. Course approval just means that you pre-approve whatever you're going to study overseas to count back towards your degree at UTAS. So college-specific criteria. Feel something to do with your major, something to do with your minor, something you need to get one course that counts back towards your major, 1 unit, and you have your extension zone, your electives. So those are the eligibility criteria. So when you're choosing a program, we want it to be relevant to your studies. We want you to think about your career goals. Okay, so what are you studying now? What do you want to do in the future? We want you to maximize your benefit. So when I went on exchange, I was studying arts, business with a minor in French. So I went to a French part of Canada with a very good business school so that I could say, well, I've studied at one of the best business schools in the world. I also, super cultured, know a little bit of French. I know French. I also know Canadian French. And they go, wow, that's very impressive. I also like skiing and getting outdoors, so lots of snowboarding. And I met people from all around the world. So these are the sorts of things, it sort of ties into your story when you start thinking about the job that you want, the people around you that you know can help you in that in that aspect. So these are the sorts of things that we want you to start thinking about. Relevant to your studies, what are your career goals? How do you maximize the benefit? Maybe you've got family in the UK, you want to visit them. And so an exchange is perfect for you because then you can go and stay with them or at least visit them. And then the next step is just express interest. So we have different application forms. So we've got a virtual exchange application form if you want to go and study virtually in winter and in summer or during the semester this year. Likewise, if you're thinking about going on exchange in semester 2, just complete the application form and that's your expression of interest. What are the application deadlines? And thank you all so much for sticking with me throughout this presentation. I know it's a bit dull how it can be just the hairdryer from me, but the application deadlines. So winter school, that's between June and July this year. Application expression of interest due March 15th. Semester 2, 2021, it's highly unlikely those programs will be going face-to-face. but we want you to get your expression interest before March 15th. Then we've got summer schools. So that's from when semester 2 ends. So let's say November through to February next year. Want you to have those applications in by September 15th. And then for semester 1 next year, because we're already thinking about it, and we don't know if it'll be virtual or in person, coronavirus uncertainty, fingers crossed, we want you to have your application in by July 31st. So those are the deadlines. Now it's time to share. I think let's go to questions. So thanks for hanging tight. Thanks for sticking with me. If you want, you can make a booking through Career Hub. That's for a one-on-one chat. I can give you some advice. I've got a Facebook page. I'm always putting updates and the different sort of programs that are available there. Instagram, when we get cool submissions of photos from students overseas, that's where it goes. You've got our direct email address there, and that's our website at the bottom. So I'll stop sharing for a moment. I'll stop recording, and then let's answer some questions.